What up, cucks? It's your boy the Hater up in this mug. And I wanted to do a quick video based upon a comment that I got. Now, I need to go and look at all the video requests that I have in the pipeline, including some of the people that paid to have me make videos. Sorry, I'll get right to it, cucks. But for now, I want to do this video about a subject that basically kind of came into my mind because one of you, the loyal listeners, made a pretty good comment, right? The comment was about how Randy Orton basically is mid, right? And I was thinking to myself, wait a second, Randy Orton is great. But then I continued to read the comment, and the guy, I'm sorry, I forget your name right now, cuck, but, you know, take credit. I'll probably recognize it. So take credit, write a comment on this video, and I'll pin your ass, hopefully. His point was that the last 10 years, like the second half even, of Randy Orton's career has essentially been phoned in. It's completely meaningless. And it got me thinking, like, fuck, that's right. You know, it's true. Like, Randy Orton peaked so early, right? And this idea that he continues to be this great wrestler is also a lie, right? You hear a lot of, like, wrestlers just giving props to Orton, being like, this guy is so good. He doesn't even know how good he is. Hold on a second, man. Wait a second. I like me some Randy Orton for different reasons, but I like me some Randy Orton. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, right? This idea that Randy Orton is somehow visibly awesome is an exaggeration. Like, Randy Orton is boring, right? And even before I read this comment, I made this point in one of my previous videos, like this week, I think, right? Where I basically said that, like, if we're being honest, like, Randy Orton, all his matches are a bunch of shit moves, and then eventually he does the RKO, right? Now, this works for him, you know, and it's given him longevity, don't get me wrong, but this is not good enough. I mean, let's be real. This is not good enough. Like, the periodic RKO spot, oh, Evan Bourne went for a shooting star and he was intercepted into RKO, great. We've seen this. Shawn Michaels used to do it with a super kick, you know? We've seen it before. It's nothing, like, crazy. I mean, it's fun here and there, but the big idea here is how good is Randy Orton, right? Now, in assessing this and in making the point that I'm making in this video that he's fucking overrated, right? We're going to look at every element of Randy Orton starting with the beginning of his career. When he first debuted, he was a massive jobber, right? I remember, I think this was his first televised match. If not, it's one of his first televised matches. No, it wasn't. His first televised match, I think he just lost to Brock Lesnar. Like, Brock Lesnar and him were wrestling. Randy Orton goes for a crossbody. Lesnar counters him to an F5, and that's it, right? Good outing by Randy Orton. He had, like, bangs, so he looked kind of goofy, but, you know, good outing, right? Then the first real, like, display of Randy Orton being kind of like a character was, I think he was drafted to Raw or something like that, right? And he came out, he had like a bullshit match. He hit his finishing move, the Overdrive back then, which is basically MVP's Playmaker, or the, whatever the fuck Elix Skipper called it, the play of the day. The play of the day, motherfuckers. He hits the play of the day on some jobber, I forget who, right? And then he has like an interaction with JR where he like gives JR back his hat that like the bad guy, it was like Rob Conway or something, stole JR's hat and he gives it back to like, to JR, and JR's like, this young man has been raised right, like he's got very good manners, right? And then he had a failed run with the Randy News Network, the RNN, where he would give updates. This was hilarious. This led to nothing. Eventually he just got like destroyed. And then long story short, he did nothing with his career until it was time to join Evolution, right? And this is where like, I had a hard time believing him as like a credible threat because I'm like, this is the undercard jobber. Like, he was an undercard jobber. Just like Cena, too, to be honest, you know? Like, people have this, like, nobody, like, really watched wrestling back then that watches it now. Let's be honest. So people have this idea that John Cena debuted against Kurt Angle and then he was, like, this perpetual mid-carder. No, he debuted against Kurt Angle, then for, like, a year, he was an undercard jobber. Like, he was just losing every match. Like, every match, losing, like, Spike Dudley and shit, right? Until it was time for him to, like, get the rapper gimmick, which was like a year and a half after that, I believe. So, same thing with Orton. Like, he had like a year and a half of like bullshit career. He didn't do anything, right? And it's really that simple, motherfuckers. Now, with all that being said, you know, like, we shouldn't even count all this because the reality is his career did begin with Evolution. But it was hard to get the stink of jobber off him, right? Like, he's out there helping Triple H in matches, and you're like, wait a second, this is like the jobber from 2 weeks ago, right? But during this time, he becomes the Intercontinental Champion, and he starts climbing up the card, like, pretty well, right? He becomes, like, the next guy in Evolution, even though, like, clearly Batista was, like, in my opinion, the better of the two, but nevertheless, he becomes the guy, and eventually, after Triple H drops the title to Benoit at WrestleMania, like, after, like, a uneventful, boring-ass title run that Benoit has, like, he has to defend the title against Orton, I think, at SummerSlam. And Orton wins. You know, like, this is one of the biggest upsets of all time because it's like, this mid-card jobber just beat, to be fair, another mid-card jobber who would eventually turn out to be a piece of shit murderer. But nevertheless, like, this mid-card jobber just beat Benoit, right? And you're thinking to yourself, wow, like, this is obviously going to be a short title run because Orton is not, you know, I hate to say this, but the argument would always be like, he's not ready, right? And it's true. He's not ready because he's young and he's like the third guy in Evolution. So this kind of came out of nowhere. But nevertheless, they go through with it, right? And Randy Orton starts feuding with Triple H after this, right? For a short while, because then after that, eventually, like, Triple H moves forward and, like, he has to put over Batista and things like that. But up until that point, right, he's having this meaningful feud with Triple H, and he is over, motherfucks. He's big time over. So, he's been kind of made. Then he kind of bounces back and forth doing nothing on Raw, having meaningless feuds and meaningless matches. And then he enters this love angle with Stacy Keibler, right? And then after that, he betrays Stacy, hits her with the RKO, which has become a hilarious meme. And in that, he kind of establishes himself as like a massive heel, and he goes after The Undertaker, right? And he's the one, people don't really talk about this much, but Randy Orton is the one that kind of established The Undertaker's like undefeated streak at WrestleMania, right? Before Randy Orton, it really wasn't a thing. Like, they'd acknowledge it at WrestleMania, they'd be like, Undertaker's undefeated at WrestleMania. But like back then, like, if people remember, like, Edge was also like 8-0 at WrestleMania or something. So it's like, there was other people that were undefeated and it didn't really matter until Randy Orton specifically wanted to go after Taker because Taker is a legend, right? And Randy Orton is a legend killer. So he wanted to specifically end the career of The Undertaker. That doesn't work out very well, but he has a few good moments, and he pretty much eventually gets the last laugh and buries The Undertaker alive. Eventually, after Eddie Guerrero's death, he takes Eddie Guerrero's spot at Survivor Series and essentially is the last man standing in SmackDown versus Raw, the Survivor Series battle. He's the one that eventually hits the RKO on Michaels and wins that match. Once again, putting another moment into his career, right? Then, long story short, he's out there feuding with Cena for a while, winning, losing titles, having a very good career, right? The crown achievement, of course, comes with legacy, right? Bald Randy Orton, as people have affectionately called him now, Bald Randy Orton was just built different. Like, let's be honest, right? Bald Orton is one of the best characters ever, right? When he would, like, come out and he had that gimmick where he had, like, IED, intermittent explosive disorder, and the whole point was at any given moment, this guy can just snap and punt you in the head, right? That was great. That was amazing character work, right? He really kind of believed that this guy was fucking going crazy. Like, he tried to make himself look insane. He went from, like, the handsome, like, overachiever type to this, like, deranged, like, monster who had this, like... It was also great as a storyline because in the storyline, he had this, like, long-term grudge with Triple H against, Triple H, and, like, it was finally manifesting. I remember all these nerds back then. I used to go to this bar to watch, like, wrestling, to watch wrestling pay-per-views, and people were like, this is great, like, consistency and long-term storytelling. I'm like, it's not. But sure, like, they made it seem like that, right? Like, obviously, Orton was doing other shit. From the time Triple H betrayed him, he was doing many other things, having many other feuds, but the idea was that this was always in the back of his mind. So, in my opinion, Orton should have won that match at WrestleMania. That really is the difference between him being, like, a legit legend and being what he is now. And that's fine, but I think that was basically the peak of his career. He had a few title runs after that, of course, and he had a few other peaks, but nothing was really that special, right? That was it. Like, he didn't have anything special beyond that. He won another Royal Rumble. He joined the Wyatt family. But during all of this, he felt like a mid-carder, didn't he? You know what I mean? Like, during Bray Wyatt's title run, like the WWE title was completely meaningless, right? It was the inferior title. The Universal title was the superior title, right? Brock Lesnar had that one, and Randy Orton and Bray Wyatt, who were basically two mid-carders, would feud for like the mid-card WWE title. Now, the problem is that is still the WWE title, number one, and two, and perhaps most importantly, Cucks, that title is extremely important because, like Randy Orton was still Randy Orton, right? But he was still kind of like, towing that line of mid-carder, right? Between mid-carder and main eventer, right? But it was good. Now, after that, what happens next, right? What happens next? I mean, let's be real, right? Has Randy Orton, since that point, which was, I'm going to estimate like 2010, 2012-ish, like since that time, has he done anything of value? The answer is absolutely not. Now, he was there to play the other guy in the feud with Edge, right? But that was more of an Edge moment, right? Orton didn't really add much to it. Like, he's been solid this whole time, but he just feels like a guy that's just there, right? Kind of like, let me think of a good example of someone who's just kind of like a Rey Mysterio, right? Like, where it's like, he's just there, but he doesn't do anything meaningful, right? He's just there. He's a solid wrestler. He's a bona fide Hall of Famer, but he's just there, right? That's kind of like how Randy Orton feels. Now, for some of this time, you could excuse it, right? You could excuse a few WrestleManias here and there when he was wrestling Bray Wyatt, even though it was completely meaningless, because these matches had some value. Like, he joined the Wyatt family. This was supposed to be one of the main events. It wasn't. It was like the first match. It was like one of the worst matches ever. But it was for a world title. His other match with Bray Wyatt where he burns him alive. At the end of the day, that was like, the end of the Fiend, basically. Randy Orton put that motherfucker away so many times. Randy Orton just pretty much like, every time Bray Wyatt would get some momentum, he would run into Orton, and Orton would just quickly put him in his place. He'd be like, you're a fat jobber. Punt. You know what I'm saying? But beyond that, like since the pandemic, like what has Orton done? He had like a bullshit tag team with Matt Riddle. He came back at Survivor Series and didn't do anything really. Like he's no longer a threat to win the Royal Rumble. If he's like in an Elimination Chamber match, he's not really a threat to win that match, right? He's not really a threat to beat anybody, right? So it's like at this point of his career, if LA Knight were to beat Randy Orton, like that wouldn't even be an upset. You know what I mean? Like it would be like, oh yeah, of course. Why wouldn't he? LA Knight is on the rise and Orton is on the decline. Even though Orton is like the same age as him, like think about how much he's accomplished. So, while I hate to say that Randy Orton is now mid, the fact of the matter is he is mid, right? And it sucks. It's a shame, but this is just how it goes down, right? Like it's really difficult for someone like Randy Orton to continue to do something unless he really wants to, right? This is why, there's so much respect that needs to be put on like people like Sting, Undertaker, Ric Flair, right? These motherfuckers that went on forever, right? Especially Sting and Flair, right? Sting in his 40s and 50s was in TNA kicking ass. You know what I'm saying? He was kicking ass in TNA. Like he was having world title matches in his late 40s, right? He was like the main event guy. He was reinventing himself, trying to like get a company going basically, right? And Randy Orton just doesn't want to do that. Like he's capable of it. We've seen it in the past, right? But Randy Orton is just in that bullshit phase of his career where he's just going to be there for as long as he can be to make some money and have some fun. And good for him. I'm not like against it. I don't hate him or anything, but it's like we have to be real, right? It's like you have Randy Orton, like in terms of the booking of the wrestlers, like it's like you have Randy Orton who's like a 15-time world champion, and I think I'm not sure because I'm probably talking to my ass at this point, but it's like who has in the active roster who has the next most title runs, right? Seth Rollins. Like Roman Reigns, obviously, but like, Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns have like 3 or 4 each. Randy Orton is like a 14-time champion, right? So it's like, after that, who is it? Let's take away the Shield guys. Who is it after that? AJ Styles, who has 2? Like everybody else is like a 1-time champion or a 2-time champion, right? Like There's nobody else that's does WWE right now have any like 5-time champions? No, they don't. Like they have like Drew McIntyre, 2-time champ, like Braun Strowman, 1-time champ. Like they have like nobody, right? So Randy Orton is a 15, 14-time champ. Like, what the fuck? He should be blowing past people like JD McDonough. He should be blowing past people like Gunther, who's a mid-card jobber, right? There's nobody who has any kind of title lineage, title pedigree, right? So Orton, in my opinion, deserves a bit more than this. But what can you do? You know what I mean? If he doesn't want to do it, he doesn't care enough, just wants the paycheck, I get it. I don't even blame him. But unfortunately, the truth remains the truth. And the truth is that Randy Orton is mid now. Cooks.